Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to be diving into how to use your DAW as an effect rack. All right, so the console I live on most of the time is an X32. Maybe you've got an M32. Maybe you've got some other console. There's plenty of them out there. The X32 has 4 built-in effects racks that you can use that are send and return effects. The previous video, I talked about the difference between insert and send and return effects. If you haven't checked that out, I'll stick that up right here. I'll also post it in the description that you can check out afterwards. But with this video, maybe you've run out of effects on the console. Maybe you're using all 4 of your send and return effects and you want something special that you can't get with the console. You've got a DAW, and so you've got a laptop or a computer. You want to use that computer for all it's worth. So we're going to talk today about how we hook up through a USB cable, route audio from our console into our DAW, and then we bring it back into the console just like an old school send and return effect. So let's dive into this right away.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this here. On the left-hand side, you can see we've got our soundboard. For me, I'll be using the X32. And on the right-hand side, we've got the DAW. We'll start out using StudioOne, which is the StudioOne Pro version. I'll also touch on Ableton Live at the end. Now, we've got a couple settings that we need to do in our soundboard. We're going to pick a bus. For me, bus 9 is available, so I'm going to go ahead and use bus 9. And I'm going to build a mix into bus 9. Whatever inputs we want to use into this effect, we're going to send into bus 9. Then I'm going to route that out USB 3. In case you are streaming out to the same console and you're using 1 and 2 to go into your streaming device, we're going to use USB 3 as our output. That's going to send over into the DAW. And then in the DAW, we're going to have to build an input channel, and we're just going to use channel 1 and we'll map it to USB 3. So that'll be pretty easy. Then we'll build an effects channel inside the DAW. We'll add something like a reverb or a delay, and then we will send that back out, output 3 and 4, which will be mapped to USB 3 and 4, sending back over to the left into the soundboard, and we'll pick that up to be able to do stuff with it on auxiliary in 1 and 2. So aux in 1 and 2 will be fed by USB 3 and 4. We're going to walk through all of this, but this is the basic concept. In the console right now, we've got 4 buses already allocated to onboard effects. So they're already doing this. It's just all in the console. Bus 13, as an example, sends to an effect rack in the console, and then it's returned on the effects returns, which has a stereo pair of faders allocated for the effects 1 returns, left and right. So we're just doing that. We've got these auxiliary inputs available on the console, some faders that are available, and we're just going to use them, but go through the DAW. Now, one thing to note, this green arrow and the red arrow are in fact the same USB cable. So there's an X USB slot on the back of this console, which allows me to have 32 inputs and 32 outputs from the desk across USB. We're only going to use 1 output and 2 inputs. So this is going to be the setup. Now, I'm going to make sure we mention this in both times when we're looking at the DAW, but you have to have monitoring in your DAW turned on for this to work. So see the note at the bottom. Monitoring has to be on for this to work. All right, enough of looking at this little slide here. Let's jump into the console. We're going to start to route this stuff at the console, and then we'll jump into StudioOne as the DAW and take a look at that.
Bus 9 is what we want to use. We're going to be using this one for our sending. And in this example, well, I'm going to be using AES50A as my inputs. Now, I don't have those inputs routed in this environment, but when we talk about the screen up here and we look at the internal routing and what we need to do, that's going to become important for us. But over here on the 3rd layer down, way over here, we have our auxiliary 1 through 4 inputs, and these usually are not going to be used. A lot of us run a PC input here on aux in 5 and 6. We've got the USB recorder that most nobody uses, but that's if you've got a thumb drive up in that USB slot, you can play back MP3 tracks or WAV files that are on there, and those would come through this USB input. And these are your other built-in effects returns here. But we're going to focus on auxiliary 1, 2, or 3, and 4. So with this in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a microphone that is set up here on channel 32, and I'm going to select bus 9. I'm going to hit sends on fader, and we're going to make sure that this channel is set up into our bus. So that's the only thing that's really going to be going into the bus. You can see nothing else, although I've got things unmuted. Nothing else is going into this bus. So the goal is for this vocal mic to go out USB into the DAW, and then have it come back from the DAW over here and return on auxiliary 1 and 2. So that's our goal. Now, one of the other things we need to do immediately is select auxiliary 1. Sorry, I'll hit sends on fader, turn that off. Auxiliary 1, and we're going to hit the link button up here, the first encoder, and we're going to link auxiliary 1 and 2, which is going to give us a stereo pair. Now when we bring this up, you can see they move in parallel there. So that's nice. I'm just going to leave this here, and I'm going to mute it just for right now. Later on, when we get to where we're running in the DAW, I'll be able to unmute this and turn it up and down, and we'll be able to hear things happening. So at this point, we've got our bus, which has one vocal mic going into it, and we have our auxiliary returns, which are muted, but turned up and linked. So we're going to dive into the screen, and we'll show you some up close of all the routing that we're going to do. Okay, so here we are up at the console, up at the screen, and we're going to hit routing. So we're on the input screen here. When I look at the inputs, again, this example is that I've got AES50A as my inputs for most of my channels. You can see on 25 to 32 here that I do have some user-defined settings, and that's just so I can get this microphone to work. As I'm talking, well, you can't see it now, but as I'm talking, my microphone is picking me up just in the room. So what we're going to do is come over here, and the first thing we need to do is go all the way over to User, to the User tab. Now, if you don't have this tab, do check the description. You want to be on version 4.0 of the firmware or greater. Do make sure that you save your scene before you do that upgrade so that you don't lose all of the settings, EQ, compression, all the things on your channels when you make that firmware update. Just save the scene to the console, and then you can just reload it after you do the firmware upgrade. All right. In user settings, the first thing we want to do is we're going to deal with our outputs. All right, so we're going to come over here to the first encoder knob. We're going to hit down. We're going to go to output, and we're going to go up to output 1 through 8. And you can see here, again, for my stream, I've got 11 and 12 is my live stream that I'm sending out to my computer. So I don't want to change that. That's why we're going to use output 3. So I'm going to scroll down here to output 3. I'm going to go down here and find output, and then I'm going to find output 9. So our bus is output 9. Bus 9 is, sorry, I should even back up. Let's look at outputs here. I want to confirm that on the output tab, output 9 is set to mix bus 9, and it's post fader. So if it wasn't, we would come over here, we would find mix bus, we would go down to mix bus 9, and then we could choose the tap point over here, post fader. So that is set up. I took that for granted. Now, when we come over here to the user tab to the right, then we choose that that user output 3 is going to be output 9. Just trust me, it works. So the next thing we want to do is we want to click on this first encoder knob, go back up to input, and now we have to set up to have card come back in for input 3 and 4. So we're going to take input 3, we're going to go to card in and card in 3, and then we'll push the second knob so it goes down to 4, and then we assign that to 4. Okay, so now I have input 3 and 4 bringing in through card 3 and 4. That's going to make the DAW section work when it pushes back over to the desk. But that then gets us set up for custom user inputs. Now we go over to the left and we're going to come back to our input area. And on the aux in side, so we've got all of our main inputs, 1, 2, 3, 4 encoders. This fifth encoder is aux in. Right now it's set up on auxiliary ins, which are the physical connections on the back of this desk. We want to scroll down and we're going to do card. We can either do card 1 through 4 or user in 1 through 4. And I'm just going to select user in 1 through 4 since that's what we punched in. But either user in or card would work the same. Because we've set it up as the card inputs. So I'm going to select my aux in 1, I'm going to hit the home button, and then I'm going to page over to the config tab. And here you can see now auxiliary 1 is bringing in card 1. Now in our example we talked about using aux 1 and 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this here to be fed with auxiliary 3. And then aux 2 is going to be auxiliary 4. So now we have the true setup. We could have just left it and used auxiliary 3 and 4 instead of 1 and 2, but we've already talked about 1 and 2. So this just switches our inputs. I am going to come in here, and this is auxiliary 3. That you can see it up here, auxiliary 3. I'm just switching that to be card in 1, auxiliary 4, card in 2, just so we're not duplicating inputs. All right, so let's back up now. We're going to zoom in on our auxiliary ins and take a look at what that looks like. One last piece with our routing that I almost neglected to mention. If we page over to card, on card 1 through 8, we need to select user out 1 through 8. That will bring up our custom settings in the overview area to the right. You'll see that 11 and 12, again, are my live stream outputs going out to my live stream, but then mix bus 9 is the mix bus that we're using here for this custom setup that we're building. Hey, hold on. Before we keep going, the most important button you can hit is the like button. Smash the like button. This content will help go out to more people that way. All right, back to the console. Here we go. So these are dark blue. It's going to be a little hard to see, but auxiliary 1 now has a CO3. Auxiliary 2 has CO4. Maybe if I change this color, let me just do that real quick. Maybe if I make it white for us. There you go. Now you might be able to see that. So auxiliary 1 says CO3, auxiliary 2 says CO4. Then I switch this auxiliary 3 to be CO1, auxiliary 4 to be CO2. We just want to get the right inputs, whichever inputs you want to use, into this auxiliary 1 and 2, or again, you could link these two and use this pair instead of doing the remapping.
Okay, so here we are at StudioOne. We're going to jump in. You can see down here I already have, I'll go in and hit configure audio device, and here I've selected XUSB, which is coming from the Behringer console. Also make sure that the sample rate is 48. You're probably, because you're live streaming, have your desk at 48, and you want your DAW to match that so you don't get any cracks and pops. All right, I'm gonna hit OK, and then I'm just going to create a new song. Here I'll just call it Test DAW. We are set at 48. Doesn't matter any of the other stuff. We're gonna do an empty song, so here we go. And now we're at the base setup of the DAW. We're going to do a couple things up here under Song Setup. This allows us to do our mapping internally of inputs and outputs. And so by default, it's going to come up with these couple different inputs, a stereo input, and we're just going to honestly get rid of all of these inputs. So I'm just going to select it, hit remove, remove, and remove. Now, I'm going to add one mono input, which is actually going to bring something back in. And remember, this input is going to be coming in on USB 3. So we want to select input 3. And then I'm going to hit apply. All right, now I'm going to go to my outputs. We have a main output that we're not able to remove. We're just going to deselect it. We're going to add a stereo output. And remember, we're going to map this to output 3 and 4. And we'll hit apply. And notice that it's called sub 1. It's just a sub output, a subgroup, if you will. This comes to be important later on. So I'm going to hit OK, and this takes us back to the blank screen. Now we've done our internal mapping in the DAW. Now we just have to build. I'm going to add a channel here. I'll call it input. It's one of them, and we're going to hit OK. Now, when I turn on monitoring right here, this little guy right there, you can see now my mic is already coming in here. And so I've got this set up so that we've got input 1. Remember, input 1 actually maps to USB 3. So that's what's coming in. Now I'm going to come down here to the bottom right. I'm going to hit mix, and this is going to bring up my mix window. Hide these other things just to make it less confusing. There we go. I can turn my main fader down. I don't need that in this scenario. I'm going to also hit browse and close that. So at this point, I've got an input from my console coming into my soundboard. This is just as if you were going to be doing any multi-track recording, and if you wanted to, you could just hit this record button, and then it would be armed, and if you hit record, you'd be able to record this audio. You can see it's recording my voice right now. I'm going to hit stop, and we don't need that, so we'll delete it. And we're not actually going to be recording, but that's what you could do if you were multi-track recording. So we've got monitoring turned on. The next thing we need to do is add an effects rack. So for me, I can just click on this, add effects channel. I can just rename it if I want to, reverb. Okay. Now notice that these are mapping right now to the main output. Well, you can do this one of two ways. You can either do a send here, which would send to reverb. And so you can see now that that channel is coming over here to reverb, or you can disregard this. Here, I'll remove this. And you can just say, only route this to reverb. So now it's routed to reverb, not to the mains. So this input won't even go over to the main output at this point. What we're going to do now, you can see that the effect here is sent to mains, but we want to send that to our subgroup. So we're going to click subgroup. So now what we've done is if you are at this point and you look back at your desk, your console, you're going to see now that you have audio coming in to your console on aux in 1 and 2, if you've set everything up right. But we still don't have an effect. So now we're just doubling our channel. And if you happen to talk into this microphone and listen to both of these, you're going to hear that you have the initial input source and a slight delay with your return coming in, and that's because the computer is latent. It's adding latency. So let's pick a fun effect here. We're just going to click on this and add a reverb. Let's see here, room reverb. And they've got some default settings, and we're going to pick something that's going to be very easy to hear. So let's pick a cathedral. There we go, cathedral. Biggest thing we can find. And so at this point, just to test to make sure that you have everything working, I'm actually going to unmute on my desk here. I'm going to unmute auxiliary 1 and 2. And as I turn this up, you'll be able to hear this effect happening. So here we go. Hey, I'm in a cathedral. So now I've turned the effect back down so that you're not getting the effect, but if I turn it back up, now you're getting the effect coming in, and then I can turn it back down, and that's with faders 1 and 2. You can leave it up and then just mute it, and so now I've left it up and I've muted it, and you don't hear it anymore. So you've got all these great options that you can do with this, but that is the basics of how this is going to work in Studio Live. Do make sure that you've got monitoring turned on, make sure that you're sending. Remember, we're going to send and route one input over into our reverb effect, and then our reverb effect is, in fact, going to route to our sub outs which is output 3 and 4 on USB, which is coming back over to the console. And we can look over here too, just for to make sure that we've got everything set up right. Notice that nothing is coming over to the main output. Okay, so again, if I turn this and set it to mains, now we can see that we've got stuff coming over into the mains. And I want that, in fact, to go to sub 1. All right, so let's jump in and talk about Ableton Lives. This is Ableton Live 10, version 10 Lite. I don't use this, so I am not quite as familiar with how all of this stuff works out. However, I've punched around and been able to figure out a couple things here. So when I open this up and I just start a new session, this is what comes up. Already I can see that I have some audio here coming in on channel 3 and channel 4. And so to our benefit, I'm going to look at, well, I was going to say I was just going to roll with this like it is, but I want to look up here at the properties. So if I go, where is it? Live, preferences, excuse me. And we're going to go into audio. You can see here that I've already selected audio input device as X32 or XUSB for inputs and outputs. Now, input configure, okay, I was able to name some of these. I actually don't need 1 and 2. I need 3 and 4. So this is going to be my, I'm going to call it bus in. Maybe I'll call it, yeah, I'll just call it bus in. Okay, and then I need a stereo output. And we're also going to go 3 and 4 for stereo output. So this is to X32. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to leave them like that. And I'm going to hit OK. And then I'll close this out. And so now, see, it's got all these things like MIDI. So I'm going to delete this MIDI channel. I'm going to delete this other MIDI channel. I really only need one audio source, so I'm going to delete this channel 4 as well. Now, we come down here and we can say external in, and then we're going to pick the bus in. Okay, so now we've got that audio coming in. We can see we've got audio coming in. This is the big thing though. We're not metering anything. This is what I learned the last time when I was messing with this off the screen. I've got to turn on monitoring, and now we have audio coming in. Look at that. That's a fancy little button right there. It went from off to in, okay? Now, if you look over to the right side, you can see that it's mapping to our main outs, and we don't really want that. So audio 2, okay, we're gonna hit sends only. So for audio 2, we're gonna hit sends only, and that way we don't see it going over to the master anymore. Now what we have the ability to do is take A, and we're gonna crank A all the way up. Now we can see audio going to the effect rack A. And then audio 2, we're going to external out, and this is going to be 3 and 4. Okay, so this would be coming back into our console now. But again, just like in Studio One, we're just duplicated. We don't have any effect in here yet. So somehow along the lines, I'm going to come over here, find a reverb. Now I'm going to pick Cathedral, and maybe I can drag it. Hey, look at that. Reverb and Cathedral. So now, if I come over to my console and I unmute my auxiliary 1 and 2 and I push this up, we should be able to hear that we've got, there, I turned it back down, but we've got a cathedral effect, right? So that's kind of cool. So we can bring this up, we can have that going on. I turned it back down so you can hear what I'm saying, but you can play with that coming back in and out of the console. So this is a quick look, Ableton Live. Again, I am no aficionado at Ableton. This is the extent of what I know right here, and hopefully this is helpful for you guys.
So now as I talk into my microphone, you can see that not only is mix bus 9 lighting up, mix bus 9 then is sending out to our DAW. The DAW is now sending back across USB into auxiliary 1 and 2, and I have the ability to turn this down, turn it up. I can mute or unmute, and so this is what I'm doing on the DAW. A second ago, I was just muting, unmuting, bringing up and down on this setup. But you've now got the ability to mix this however you want. You can even select and you can do some EQing if you needed to on this return, just like you would on any other return. Also keep in mind, like we've talked about in previous videos, you now have the ability to select it to go to your stereo bus, or if you just need this effect for live stream, you can uncheck your stereo bus and just route this into your live stream mix bus or matrix or whatever you're using. Hopefully that sparks your brain on some fun things you can do. Maybe you've got some really cool delays that you want to use, or some nice sweet reverbs that you've found that you've worked and you're able to use them now in your live mixing and your live stream. So listen, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button, give it a like, share this video, hit the subscribe button, all of the things. We'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.